But she married into these four, which is even more impressive. Let me present our moderator for this next panel, Debra Innocenti-Placette.
Crystal and I have a mutual admiration club. I am a big Crystal fan, and I always like sending some of my mentees and clients to Crystal, and because she gives them advice that's not only kind of the intellectual side of dealing with certification, finance and all of those things, but she also gives them kind of the wisdom of how to navigate all of these and figuring out how it meshes with who you are and what you want in the world. And so I think that is invaluable. So Crystal, thank you for all that you do. So a hand for Crystal. We have some amazing women, and I looked at your program. You've been blessed all day with some amazing speakers that are going to talk to you today. And I'm going to kind of start out with some subjects. We've got speakers who've got some slides because they are awesome women, so they're gunners, they've got slides. I want to get kind of I want to invite you to make the panel the dialogue, because I think that the most valuable thing about these conferences is the conversations. And you've got these amazing women. Ask them questions, and we'll have time at the end for questions. But and I'll let them each tell you their preference. But my preference is interrupt me while I'm talking, because I really want to hear who you are, what you're thinking about, what kind of intellectual nuggets that we're talking about that really resonates with you. So let me start out by doing this, and hopefully you can look at my time. Sensitive. Each of us are going to talk, somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes to make sure that we have time for everybody. How many of y'all are entrepreneurs in the sense that you are the heads of your businesses? Raise your hands high and proud. Okay. And how many of y'all are, executives, personnel in existing organizations, but not necessarily the owners? Okay. Kind of helps me get a sense of the audience. I want to talk about kind of a few things. One, I want to start off with, in terms of trends in entrepreneurship, I want to talk about cities and communities. That's kind of the first thing. And next, I want to talk about diversity, particularly in the context of startups and emerging businesses. And then talk about kind of some micro trends like B corporations, benefit corporations, and also datapreneurship, which is kind of a new trend that's starting to get some permeation in the noise. So community. There's a saying that cities make entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs make cities, and I think that is absolutely true. Dell actually has a top 40 global cities that it releases every year or so, and it basically ranks cities, and the way they style it is cities that enable innovation and change through technology. That's how they've styled their list. And they rank the cities according to human capital, which is essentially kind of the right skills, the right talents, infrastructure, which is kind of the right architecture of the city, the right services that are in place, and commerce, kind of the right opportunities for businesses to be able to accelerate innovation, growth, and profitability. The top two cities of the most recent survey are, not surprisingly, San Jose and San Francisco, California. Austin is number 7. Dallas-Fort Worth is 16, and we do make the list for number 42. We've got some work to do, and there's a lot of people in this room who I recognize who are doing a lot of the work in terms of looking at infrastructure and squawking about and grousing about our lack of infrastructure, including public transportation. And my husband's had a kind of a Facebook rant for the past month about kind of public transportation. We were recently in a mediation in Houston, and downtown, you can get on the bus for free and kind of go from place to place in the business district. And they get business people on the bus, and they get people thinking about the bus as something not for people who can't afford cars, but for people who are urban-minded and want to get around easily without spending a lot on parking garages and cars and all those sorts of things. And, you know, making sure that people who are disabled can utilize buses and utilize public transportation with ease. You know, these are the sorts of things that major companies are looking at before they want to stay here. And, you know, human capital, making sure that we have talent. And I'm going to, you know, this is kind of my grouse subject. And, you know, I'm very fortunate in that what I do, you know, I've become an entrepreneur myself. I left big law and decided, no, I want to do something different, more innovative, a little bit more agile. Started my own firm, and I think, you know, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have, you know, good family support. I've got an incredibly supportive husband, and, you know, he, you know, is my sounding board, my cheerleader, and many other things, and I think that's important. One of the things we often talk about is you know, how to get talent to live, stay, and grow in San Antonio. And I have some complaints that I would like to talk about, and I'm wondering if you've got some of these complaints too. And let me keep an eye on my time so I don't grouse so long. One of the things that, and I'm trying to find a way to describe this, but I think that in conservative business environments, we get cultures that do not facilitate kind of an upward movement of people. In San Antonio, we often have this mindset of career jobs. We're going to stay in this job forever. That means the people that are under you don't have any hope of replacing you. There's not a training of leadership. Having, you know, you should be looking at a bigger job than the one you have, and should be mentoring and teaching and helping the people under you take your job, so that you leave organizations with new talent, new people, new faces, and you're going to be the new face in a bigger position that requires more expertise than you have now. One of my complaints is we don't have this right now, and we can make it happen, but it means having a commitment of always be moving and not be the sleepy town of, I like my 9 to 5, it's predictable, and I'm going to have this forever, and I'm going to hire people under me that are never going to replace me. They're just going to be fulfilling orders, and they're going to have career jobs. They're never going to get ahead. We've got to have that movement and fire and that passion, because no one's going to stay here if they don't have prospects of rising. I mean, we often hear city on the rise. It's really about people on the rise. If there's not the ability for people to rise, the city can't rise. And so we have to think about it in that granular way. And the other complaint I have in this kind of aspect, or the work that we have to do, is we have to have innovation as a goal. And so many institutions, and I am like an embodiment of it. I mean, law, we do not, it's all about risk averseness. You don't do anything different, because what you're doing right now, we know the risks. So let's not change that. We've got to have innovation as a goal, because if you are not moving forward, you are moving backwards. There is no staying still. You know, businesses, that's what you have to do. And there's a book that's been talked about a lot in San Antonio for the last few years. It came out in 2012, and it's Enrico Moretti's New Geography of Jobs. And a lot of the city leaders were kind of sharing that book and talking about it. And essentially in that book, Moretti, and fellow paisano, fellow Italiano, he talks about cities are on this spectrum of, on one end it's Rust Belt. That's kind of the rear view mirror of economies of manufacturing and low-paid jobs. And then on the other end of the spectrum is Silicon Valley, where it's about disrupting entire industries. It's about changing everything and having people scrambling to catch up. And it's the high-paying jobs, not of manufacturing the circuits in the iPhone, but designing it. And having everyone, having entire ecosystems of economies following your lead. And he said, San Antonio's listed as one of the cities on the edge. It can either tip forward into building innovation jobs, or it's going to fall backwards into just having an economy built on service industry jobs and tourism and that sort of industry. And he talks about having cities needing to have an innovation kind of talent culture. That's going to create the new economies, and it makes everything else around it grow. People who have larger salaries can pay service industry people more. And my joke used to be, I have clients who are always looking for investors, and in order to have an investor who can invest in your company, they have to be what's called under the SEC an accredited investor, meaning they have to make a certain amount per year as a single person or couple in order to be considered a sophisticated enough investor that you don't have to do this costly disclosure statements. Well, in Silicon Valley, my joke is the barista is probably an accredited investor because the cost of living is high. Here, it's a struggle to find people who make $200,000 or over as individuals or $300,000 over as couples. It's because the entire economy was lifted up by these innovation jobs. And one of the things Moretti says, and I'll read this out loud, although I've got new contacts, so I'm keeping this thing. It's also getting older, and I don't want to talk about that. But he says a company's success depends on more than just the quality of its workers. It also depends on the entire ecosystem that surrounds it. And so it's this game of we've got to create a rising tide. And that rising tide is created by innovation. And to me, diversity is just a subset of innovation, whether it's diversity in gender or whether it's diversity in color, creed, any category that you have. Because we need to bust out of old ways of seeing and doing and having everyone working at their kind of optimal skills. And we need to challenge things and ask questions of, just because it's always been done this way, why do we still have to do it that way? And I think right now we're still in a conservative business environment where people, and here's the problem, and if I could underscore this and put lots of exclamation points, I would. People in San Antonio do not want to hire talented, disruptive innovators because it scares them. And this is the problem. If we don't hire them and give them opportunities, they're not going to stay there. They're going to leave San Antonio. And wherever they leave is going to be a vital, healthy economy. The disruptive innovators who are lucky enough right now to have a job in San Antonio are like on a raft in the middle of the ocean. If they lose that job, they have nowhere to go. The people that are no longer at Rackspace, we are losing them in vast numbers because there are no other jobs. And my big complaint is they're getting kicked back on hiring, the online hiring portals that are big companies because they don't have bachelor's degrees, because they don't fit the mold of what the HR default puts in those applications. The problem is innovators, disruptors often don't follow traditional modes of rising. And if we want cookie cutters to wear suits and ties, you're not going to get innovators who are blasting through drywall and ceilings and everything else. And we're going to be punished for it. Here's karma at work by not having a vital economy. And so let's talk a little bit about diversity. Good news, bad news. The good news is women-led startups are the fastest growing startups. Good news, yay, woohoo! The subset of that, Black women-led startups are the fastest growing group. Woohoo! Yes! Okay, here's the bad news. We're the most behind. So we've got a lot of fast growing to catch up. The Babson College study and Kaufman, they've come out with a series of reports, most recent 2015 and 2016. Most women-led startups are self-funded by the founders and friends and family. They're struggling to get people to support them. VC-funded companies are most led by white or Asian men. Fewer than 5% have women on the executive team. Let me say that one more time. Fewer than 5% have women on the executive team. We're not even in double digits. 2.7% have women CEOs. And usually the outliers are if they're in a women, industry. If it's children related or if it's like women in makeup, they're okay with us in those sections. The problem is not a lack of women. It's basically the VCs are the problem. And we have to kind of bust through the whole, if you've got VCs that are mostly white, then they connect to we tend to want to hang around with people who understand us. We tend to understand people who are like us. We've got to bust out of those self-imposed bubbles. Women of color of VC-funded startups, 0.2%. We're not even rounding up. We're not even a single digit. So there's a lot of work to do. And I think we have to be aggressive with our cities and our communities and say, and we've got to educate everybody about this. And I think that the point to educate is we need innovation and disruption in industries. We need innovators and disruptors inside of big companies. We need diversity so that companies have a diversity of perspective. And I'm kind of at my last minute, so let me leave you with and kind of what's in, what's out, since we're talking about trends in entrepreneurship. I'm going to give you kind of my People magazine in and out. What's out in terms of trends in emerging businesses? Planning. Full-scale rollouts of products, slow measured responses, single owners rather than kind of people working in teams, and silos, meaning people that don't cooperate or collaborate. What's in companies that are daring, or as Aston Kutcher likes to say in terms of what companies he invests in, that have audacious ideas that are just outlandish in terms of their disruptiveness. Risk-friendly ideas and concepts. Pop-up businesses, which means, here's an opportunity. Let's pop up this business, have low cost, low investment, and as soon as that trend dies, it'll die and find a new pop-up concept. Small-scale businesses. Again, kind of riding trends, being innovative about what's being seen. Businesses that are highly networked, that collaborate, that find channel partners to work with and through. Businesses that are highly responsive, meaning they can turn on a dime, they can act quickly, as opposed to having committees and committees who analyze what's all the risk. If you act quickly, you can mitigate risk, or maybe the benefits outweighs the risk, and you just take it on. Sometimes that means getting the lawyers out of the way, and I get that. And continual development, and there's an idea of betapreneurship, which is you're constantly in beta, figuring out, let's test this, let's just get it out there quickly and see what the response is. And companies, again, B Corps, companies that have included in their mission that they want to consider the stakeholders of the world and the community, and not just the profitability for their shareholders. I'm going to pass it over to our next panelist, and she is going to introduce herself a little bit. And we've got artists and amazing people, and Alicia is one of them. So Alicia, I will turn it over to you. You go, Earl. Do whatever you want. You disrupt.
Well, my background, my first professional job was as an AV tech in a theater, so I want to respect what their rules are for this space. My name is Alicia Tafoya, and I am a theater artist, and I live in San Antonio. I've lived here for about 10 years, but I'm originally from Los Angeles, and it's a little strange place, this San Antonio, Texas thing. It certainly wasn't what I was expecting coming here, but I've really fallen in love with it. I act, I direct, I do consultations, I teach, and I do all sorts of different things. If you haven't seen me perform, there's a reason for that. Most of the performance and directing theater gigs that I take are outside of this community. I travel to New York, I'm sorry, not New York, Washington, D.C., Oklahoma is my biggest market, San Francisco, but I'll travel the nation and take gigs outside of this market because there is not a way for me to make a living doing what I do here. That's a difficult thing to really come to grips with as an artist, but what I found when I moved here was teaching, and I really love teaching. It's something that gives back to your community, and every single day I get to interact with students that have the most audacious ideas, and I get to facilitate their success, and that really makes me very, very happy. So I teach at Our Lady of the Lake University. I've taught there for 10 years. I teach in their theater program. I also teach in their entrepreneurship studies program, sponsored by Capital One. And then I teach in their nonprofit management graduate program. I also teach at Northwest Vista. I've taught at St. Mary's University. I get around. But I see a lot of opportunity here in San Antonio, and so I think that's what I want to share with you today, is some of the opportunities that you as entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders in this city can partner with arts organizations, nonprofits, artists like myself, entrepreneurs, to try to make our city a more amazing place to be. So today I'm going to talk about defining what an entrepreneur is. Raise your hand if you've never heard of the term entrepreneur. Awesome. It's going to be new for your lexicon. So we'll talk about what that means. Then we're going to identify the size of the creative industry and its impact both nationally and locally. And then we're going to explore what I think some of the paths forward for all of us might be in the San Antonio area. So, if you have a cell phone, I'd really like for you to take it out at this time. I know my students look at me like, really? Really? Yes. Take it out. Pull up your favorite browser and Google the term entrepreneur. Oh, somebody knocked my slide up. Don't you reveal the punchline. Things fell up. Did you find it? Entrepreneur? Where'd you find it? Did you find it in Merriam-Webster? Urban Dictionary! And we've been talking about how we have to move forward and not wait for things to come to pass, not take these long looks and vote on whether or not something should be added to the economy or to our business. And that's the same thing with dictionaries. It has to go through a process to approve a word. This is not in the dictionary. But Urban Dictionary has a definition for us. So it reads, one who owns a business specifically within the arts and uses several avenues within said business to give back to the community, or someone who is an artist, actor, director, etc., as well as a business owner. That's what an entrepreneur is. And most of us stumble into it. Now, why would that be? Let's think about it. You go to school, you train for, in my case, I have an MFA, Master's in Fine Arts, which is a terminal degree. Went to school for 8 years and mastered in my field of acting, directing, and performance pedagogy. I had gotten a bachelor's degree in acting and directing and dance performance. So I walked out with a degree. Awesome, now I've got to get a job. Turns out that corporate gigs for actors are few and far between. And by that I mean non-existent. don't have organizations like traditional businesses. Artists have a really, really strange situation. Think we're going to go out and get a job, and what we come to find out is that we are, congratulations, you are an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. You are your own business. Every gig or contract that you have will be on a 1099, and nobody even told you what that was in undergrad and graduate school. So all of a sudden you've got to figure out how to run your own business. You're doing your own marketing, you're doing your own tax returns, you're doing everything. But there's a really, really great opportunity here. So I think that entrepreneurs are something that you should embrace. If you look at some of the facts and figures for, I'm sorry, no.
Sorry, I'm trying to.
If you look at some of the facts and figures for artists in the nations, 34% of artists that are employed are self-employed, and that's from the NEA. And that's an awful lot of people. But I think that we can do better than that. I think that we can get artists into jobs that have longevity and that have health benefits and that have retirement plans. And not everybody wants that, to be fair. Some artists, I know I certainly do enjoy being able to travel the country and do things, but there are times in my life when, gosh, being able to have a sick day or, I don't know, take a vacation might be a really great thing. Someday I will hope to retire. But let's take a broader scope look as to what this industry is. And the studies that I found, they kind of vary in terms of terminology. I'm sure that you've all done research in your own economic impact studies, and they use different terminology. But what I'm going to look at is on the national sense, some research from the American for the Arts. Their creative industries is how they define their study. And they define in their impact study that 3.9% of all businesses and 1.9% of all employees, these jobs, are artists in this country. And that may seem like a very, very small amount, but it's a big country and that's a lot of jobs. I want to take this and put that in some better perspective with some specific numbers. So the comparison here is for the arts, American for the Arts and Economic and Prosperity Report. And we're going to compare that to the local San Antonio Creative Industry Growth and Prosperity Report put out by the Department of Culture and Creative Development. And these numbers are from 2015. That nationally, artists represents $166.3 billion in economic activity and 4.6 million jobs. And the local impact of that is $4.3 billion in economic activity and 1,736 jobs. Now that creative field or the creative industry could be anything from actors to dancers to musicians, but it could also be graphic designers and other creatives in print media. So it's a very, very diverse group of people. I'm taking my time to make sure that I'm not going over. So let's talk about a couple of the, oh goodness, time flies. A couple of the things that we can do here, because according to, and this was one of the most amazing research projects that I found that was commissioned by the American Express, the credit card company, the 2016 State of Women-Owned Businesses in America. They put out their own independent report, and what they found was that San Antonio is ranked number 3 in the top 10 metropolitan areas ranked on our growth in economic clout over the time period from 2007 to 2016. So we are on the rise. And it's important for us to realize that this is our moment. We need to take control. And that partnering with artists would be a really, really great thing. And not just artists, but artistic organizations, because there's a real opportunity. The American for the Arts Economic Impact and Prosperity Report values the economic impact for a ticket holder attending an event at right around $31.50 in the community, in addition to or above and beyond the cost of their ticket. So if somebody's going to see a play or a concert, you can expect them on average to spend around $31.50 in the neighboring community in terms of food, beverage, or retail. If you look at how it breaks down on a local versus out-of-town visitor, that's $23.50 for somebody that's local, but then it jumps to almost $50, $47.60 for somebody that's coming in from out of town, and that's food, that's retail, all of those things. So there's a real opportunity there. I want us to be aware that there are some businesses that are modeling positive partnership, and when I teach, I talk about this being mutually beneficial partnering with either nonprofits or artistic organizations for mutual benefit. And so there are organizations here that model that. Groups like Rackspace, I don't know if you know about their business model, but they actually give their employees a certain amount of money per hour worked towards service within the community. And so they gain a certain amount of time and then they can cash it in, and they actually get paid for going to volunteer at a nonprofit, and the money is invested in the time back into the community. There is a restaurant in Los Angeles where they are trying to counteract the effects of food deserts, and the name escapes me and I apologize, but if you ask me afterwards, I can Google it. But what they do is they've identified some food deserts, and they built a restaurant downtown, and they are locating that restaurant in the business district, charging a little bit higher price than what they need necessarily for a profit ratio, but all of the profits that they make goes to subsidize a meal in a food desert. So they've got two partner restaurants, one has higher prices and one has lower prices to bring food to a community that needs it. Now, sometimes we have organizations that really identify mutual benefit, and one of those organizations here, restaurants here, is Big on the Bakes. How many of you have ever eaten at Big on the Bakes? Great food, right? Kind of pricey. The first time I ever ate was because they actually partnered with the symphony. They bought into the symphony, and they were able to purchase ads on the back of the ticket, and they offer a prefix meal right before the performance of the symphony for a discounted rate. So they're investing in the symphony and in the arts, but they're also gaining my patronage in return. So there's a lot of ways in our community that we can support that. Other things that we can do would be internships, and when I say internships, I don't mean let's bring in a millennial like me and then make them do all our social media and walk away. That's not what I mean. What I mean is opportunities for them to learn from you and be mentored by you. I also mean opportunities for them to innovate for your success and their own success. But I also mean two-way learning opportunities where you grow and are bettered by their presence, and they are growing and bettered by being involved with you. And those people will be your cheerleaders for life. It's about building community and networking together and rising together. It's about shopping local. It's about putting our money where our mouth is. It's about supporting each other, not because it's cheaper, but because it's the right thing to do. And also about looking to non-traditional opportunities to grow our business. Now, I know that we would like to say that we can make all of our money in a storefront, but that's not necessarily the trend now. There are lots of gig opportunities online and gig marketplaces. And two of the things that artists are really getting into that typify those types of online engagements are online marketplaces like Fiverr, Fiverr, and it's an online gig-based community wherein you can set up your own business online. The catch is that you have to have a $5 gig. Everybody has a base $5 gig. So you can go in and shop on Fiverr and find valuable labor in terms of logo design, in terms of, I can have somebody, and this is not a joke, I can have somebody dressed as Jesus, create a video, saying whatever I want, and send it to my friend. There's a gentleman that will dress up in a costume and sing happy birthday to my niece, and I can send it to them. But they'll also look over your resume. There are people that do translation services. Everybody has a $5 gig, and then they're in control of where it goes from there. They have online reviews, they have online portfolios. There is no brick and mortar here, so there's a good way to expand and grow your business with very, very little overhead. Another way to think about it is doing away with traditional business models and thinking about growing online subscription-based. There are two big ones that come to mind when I think of subscription-based funding channels, and those are groups like Patreon. How many of you know what Patreon is? Okay, so not very many of you. It comes from the idea of patrons of the art. People give you money to allow you to be successful and grow your art. Oh my goodness, I need to wrap up here. But people subscribe and give you donations, and you get something, the donors get something in return. It's a subscription to your art, and they continue to receive your amazing work in return. Or ad-based revenues, like having a YouTube channel, and you're producing a product that people love and they watch it for free, but they're getting revenue back to you. And one more thing before I have to close, just out of respect, but also looking at questioning why there are so many of us that feel like we have to do nonprofit business models. Like, what is it about the structure of a nonprofit that is so interesting to us? Because I believe in today's economy, setting up as a for-profit institution comes with some really great benefits and opportunities in terms of sheltering ourselves from liability and in terms of growing our own personal wealth, and that's okay. Just because you're an artist doesn't mean you don't have to pay your bills. Just because you're an artist doesn't mean that you can't drive a nice car, right? We all want to be successful together. So if we can grow and work together as a community and support each other, I think that artists and entrepreneurs or artpreneurs can really come together and be successful together.
How are y'all doing? But really, how are y'all doing? Alright, so my name is Jordan Mankey, and I am the owner of All the Things Event Company. I'm not going to stand up because these shoes hurt. Just keep it real. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the new school of entrepreneurship. I started my company, the tagline is Wed Differently, so that'll come into context a little bit later. And I'm here as a millennial to talk to you guys a little bit about millennials. Yay, the three of us in here. Before we start though, I want every woman in this room to stand up. I know y'all, it's 2:30, it's at 2:30, y'all got that look in your eye like, whoo. Blood sugar is low, you know what I'm hungry. Okay, I want you guys to close your eyes. I'm checking. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. I want you to take a deep breath. And you can say this to yourself or say it aloud. It's much more fun if you say it aloud. I'm a mother-freaking badass. There we go. There's one person participating. Go ahead and say it out loud, y'all. Yes. All right, and to indulge the inner Baptist in me, I want you to turn to your neighbor. Turn to your neighbor. Look at each other. Be a friend. Say, girl. You're killing it. Do you feel better? All right. I agree. So, I have the clicker. It works. Okay. So, let's talk about the new school of entrepreneurship. What are the major rules to live by? Rule number 1, go niche. Raise your hand if you've seen Broad City. Yay! Okay, don't feel embarrassed if you don't. It's a hilarious show on Comedy Central. But if you would have pitched a female written, produced, directed, featured comedy to Comedy Central 10 years ago, they would have laughed in your face. But it is one of their highest performing shows to date. Why? Because it went niche. It's literally called Broad City, but it's about women. It's about issues specific to young women growing up in an urban environment, and it works. And it's one of the reasons why they attracted a new audience to the network, and also why they have a cult following. Obviously, I'm talking about it at a business conference. So what's a little mini case study? And also, again, indulge me because I'm basically using using this as an excuse to talk about Drag Race and Beyonce. Gotta find a way to make it work. Okay, so a great example of going niche, or you can say niche, but I like niche because you know you say cash when you talk about internet, so or cash. Anyways, sorry. How many of you watch RuPaul's Drag Race? Yeah, say it loud. Okay. Being a drag queen requires a multitude of talents. You gotta be good at makeup, styling, writing, comedy, performing, obviously lip syncing, you name it. And one of my favorite queens, Adore Delano, performer's name is Danny Noriega. He performed on American Idol a couple years before his season. Amazing voice, did a great job. Didn't go too far in the competition, kind of faded from people's memories. Comes back, revamped on Drag Race, a super niche show on an extremely niche network, and becomes almost an overnight sensation. Adore's album broke records, it went mainstream in the dance charts, but when you think about it, compare that to Danny Noriega, the performer, versus Adore Delano, the drag queen, how much farther were they able to go when they went niche? And I know that's something, especially if you're talking about conservative business environments, that's like the antithesis of what you want to do. You know, you want to appeal to everybody. But unfortunately, when you try to be everything to everybody, you end up kind of being nothing. So that's a little example of going niche. Our second rule, and this is where Beyonce comes into persona, or personal over everything. People don't just want what you do, but they want you to. This is a really crucial aspect of branding. You hear it talked about in a lot of buzzwords. If you're on Facebook, you always see an ad for, I can be a personal brand. You hear it a lot. And as one of my friends, I love her, Brandy Butler, she is a business coach. She said, there are a bunch of people who do what you do, but can't nobody do it like you. You know, no one can do what you do. I'm a wedding planner in one of the top 10 most competitive wedding markets in the country. I can throw my arm out planner as a wedding planner, right? But people aren't purchasing services from me because I do this, that, and the other. That's great, right? They do it because they like me. And that took me like a year and a half to figure that out, was that it's not so much the what that you provide, that's a big part of it. Think of it like, I'm going to talk about something else, like chicken. Think of it like a good roast chicken, right? That's your services, that's the meat, quite literally. But you're the flavor, you're the prud'hommes, you're the slap your mamas, you're and you're laughing because you know what it is. You're the flavor, that's what people want. It's like when you go to H-E-B, you want lemon pepper, Italian. I really love chicken. Anyways, so a little mini case study of inviting the personal into your brand. Beyonce. So in 2014, I don't know if you guys know this, you probably should. She dropped her self-titled album. People went crazy about it. I love you because you're like, girl, I got you. She touched on specific issues within her family, personal life, being a mom. We got to see, pictures of her wedding and little Blue Ivy, and everybody just like died. Like they just loved it. We want more of her, but a part of her brand also is the limited accessibility. So she kind of creates that vehicle for how that personal information gets disseminated. And again, when she came out with Lemonade, she dived even deeper into being personal. Some people hated it. I don't acknowledge those people. But the people who loved her, loved it, right? And so you have people who buy into that again and again. And you have to find ways, either if you are a solopreneur, if you're the face of your business, of bringing in the personal into your brand. And if you're working for a bigger business, you have to find a way to incorporate that as well. A great example. Okay, so I have this Mac with me, right? Isn't it pretty? That's literally the only reason I bought it. I told myself, rational business owner, it's portable, it's small, it's in my purse, but I bought into the branding, right? The exclusivity of having an Apple product. It's why people will pay $1,000 for a phone that doesn't have all the features of an Android, right? We tell ourselves, just like because it's free. And that's okay, that's honest, and companies like Apple know that. That's why they can make things and charge what they charge, and that's kind of a way of bringing in something personal and how you make customers feel, right? Okay, so last rule. Be different. And I'm going to touch a little bit on what Debra said earlier because I loved it so much and I took notes. Here's a tweetable. Leave generic at the pharmacy. Okay? Leave it at the pharmacy. Set the trend, be the trend. Don't do different for the sake of being different, but definitely you want to solve a problem. To rope in the concept of side hustles, I'm going to use Catalyst Wedding Magazine. It's a magazine I write for. They're the definition of different, but again, they solve a problem. They solve a lack of inclusivity in wedding media for people of color, for people of different faiths, the LGBTQIA community. They're like, where is everybody? And they decided that, you know what, let's work on that. Let's fix that problem. So they bring in issues and topics, a lot of beautiful, visual elements that are important to those couples and readers. And they've received the Girl Boss grant in its second year because of it. Ashley C. Ford, who's the senior writer at the website Refinery 29. You guys know that one? You're like, no, girl, just a little bit. She can't stop raving about it. But the reason that it works is A, because it's different, but also because it does solve that problem. So that's another thing that you're going to want to incorporate in your personal brand or either wherever you are at work. How can we think of something differently, right? Asking different questions. So another example. Do you guys know about Fenty Beauty? Yes. I love how you were like, maybe. Rihanna, everybody knows who Rihanna is, launched her own beauty brand called Fenty Beauty. And I don't know if you guys have read the headlines. There were like 40 different shades of foundation, which for a startup beauty brand is like, whoa, that's a lot. But the thing that was even more amazing was that the majority of those foundation shades were for women of color, and they flew off the shelf. And a lot of other companies were like, oh yeah, guys, we got stuff too, hold on, wait, because they recognized, oh, there's definitely a market for this. She asked a question, where are we? And she provided a product to answer that. And so that's, again, something that you guys have to really kind of incorporate. In my own business, I found that it does work to be different. When I first decided, hey, I'm going to be a professional wedding planner, I've been doing this for a couple of years, I know how to crank out a wedding, let me start. It was very generic. I was just kind of like, oh, hey guys, yeah, I do weddings. And once I kind of sat down, I was like, okay, let's look at what are some issues that are specific to San Antonio. And recognizing that appealing to marginalized communities, not just for the sake of doing it, because I'm really passionate about it, obviously, paid off. I have, the majority of my clients are same-sex couples. They're people of color, they're couples that are young at heart. And they recognize with the tagline, "Wed differently," with visual elements that are extremely inclusive. Oh, I trust that. So yeah, and kind of to piggyback off of what Debra said, just because I just loved it so much. San Antonio definitely has a way of shooing away people who ask those types of disruptive questions, right? It makes people uncomfortable. I remember one of the first questions I asked some wedding professional: why in a minority majority city is local wedding media like not reflective of that at all? That's a problem. And just kind of asking those questions within your own business. How can you think of something differently? And sometimes asking that, you're not going to be the one to ask the question, right? Sometimes it's roping in other people who have those questions, and you have to validate those questions that they have. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a leap of faith to be like, let me take a step back. Let me get somebody else and see their perspective. So yeah, that's why I started All the Days, because I was like, hey, there's definitely a market to help other types of couples. And then I started asking other questions. Why aren't women of color leaders getting lifted enough? in San Antonio. So I started a seat at the table. It's a community dialogue and dinner series. And then I was like, oh, I have to go to all these networking events, and sometimes they can just be so time New Roman. You know what I mean? Just very like, hi, here's my card. I'll never talk to you again. Bye. You know, I wanted something that went a little bit deeper. So I started Brash, where, you know, you can get a bunch of women and wine in a room and just very real. Both the things that we face on the job. I'm a multi-hyphenate, so I write. I'm an organizer, community organizer, event planner, fundraiser. I do all that type of different things. And so when you talk about, you know, side hustle, a lot of times people think it's a pet project, it's something cute, you know, yeah, that's my side hustle type thing. It's not something to be taken seriously. But I think something that people don't recognize, that a lot of people of my generation, the reason we have side hustles, A, is to pay the bills, but also to fulfill passions that we're not able to fulfill at work. So if you are working for, you know, major organizations and companies, maybe that's something that you guys need to consider, is how can we fulfill not just the needs of our customers and clientele, but also the people that work for us. How can we help them? And it's done, you know, it's a foundation to something bigger and the reflection of our hopes for something better. So if you guys have questions, do we have time for questions? Or we can have that after? My bad. My bad. But yeah, thank you guys for letting me ramble a little bit and talk.
That's why I'm getting up. All right, hi everybody. Is on? Yes. My name is Lisa McComb, and I did not bring any slides today, so that's why I'm going to stand up here and talk to you. I have a bit of a different story about where I started. I had a really good positive experience here in San Antonio with starting my company. But originally, I was with my corporation for 22 years. So I started off at AT&T in the legal department, the most structured, bell-headed thing you can be in. Disrupting is not an option. So how I approached it, because I just get bored if I don't do things, so I just don't want to sit there and do nothing with it. So I would ask for other projects to do. And eventually, and I said, you don't have to pay me extra, just let me learn more. And that's literally how I moved from Oklahoma to San Antonio 22 years ago. And during that process, we were working on putting the baby bells back together again. Southwestern Bell, all those different baby bells now are AT&T. And that's how I started my company, is I worked and I did that, and I figured out a way to take the technology. We didn't have technology, so we had to we had to write our own. So we started writing technology to answer all the questions and deal with all these truckloads of boxes and data and everything else. And then I'm thinking, okay, do I want to do this the rest of my life working for a corporation? It's like, no, I was working, 6 days a week, not seeing my kids, single mom, 2 daughters. And so they had a buyout. I said, I'm taking it, I'm going to quit. I had no other options. I mean, I did my kids were at high school and college. So during that, they realized that they had so much invested in the knowledge that I they had to do something. So they invested in me to start my company. And that was here in San Antonio. And it was a bunch of lawyers, which is really crazy. And but it was the relationship and the trust that I built up to doing that. And I had that client for 10 years. And in doing that, we continued to develop and do things with our technology that nobody else did. There's a term called e-discovery, where you're passing documents back and forth and tracking it. And so we watched how the attorneys would work. So they would come in via the internet, and we would watch them work and try to improve the process and alleviate the human touch, because that's where the errors come in, is when the humans get involved in it. So in 2007, I will say I did the U.S. The Business Development Program here, which has been 10 years ago. Crazy. So in doing all the things that we did, and we didn't try to be like somebody else, you know, we're not generic, we're not like any other e-discovery company that's out there, because we wrote our own for a specific purpose, and we had specific needs. And so now we're looking at moving into de-identification, where the HIPAA, the healthcare, government, and removing data with our pattern matching, and we have 126 foreign languages and all these weird things. And so it's really fun and it's motivating to take your technology from just litigation aspects and putting it to good use for the public to protect your data. So that was pretty exciting for us. And how we move forward with that. So my daughter is a part of my company, she's part owner now. And so she's in San Antonio, the company's based in San Antonio. I moved to Austin 5 years ago. And so where we kind of doubled, you know, each city is very unique. And even Austin is so much about Austin. They're writing apps, and it's a great city for the mindset of being innovative. So I didn't know, we're active here in Geekdom. Are you guys involved with Geekdom at all? Because that's where we have our professional address, and my services are all cloud provided. You know, here and our cloud provider is in San Antonio as well. And so now I'm working in Capital Factory, which is it's similar to Geekdom, but it's in Austin. And there's marketing people in there. It's not just about technology, but it's so inexpensive. You can go have a co-working space at Geekdom for $50 a month, and you get conference space and a professional place to have a meeting. And same thing with Capital Factory. It's a little more expensive there, but so the other thing that I did in Austin which Austin is so close, there's no reason why anybody can't do this, is you go to the different networking events. And I have ran into people that now are my strategic partners. I've got Navy SEALs that are out there promoting what we do because they need it when they run into projects, which is the cybersecurity stuff, which is I don't even know what they do and I don't want to know. So we just deal with the data to clean it up before it goes to be prosecuted. So I've got all these people within the last year and a half in Austin. And my daughter's in Austin a lot, and I come to San Antonio a lot, but it's such a corridor of information between Dallas and Houston, and everybody's so close. I wouldn't limit myself to just San Antonio, because even the people that I need as a customer aren't in Austin either, because they have a branch, but it's not headquarters. So I've taken on advisors from my company, and the advisors, do you guys have mentors? Mentors, yes. Yes. And they hold you accountable, and you pay it back when you can too. So I still do that. I've had a company for 17 years, but we're going into different markets, and I need different mentors and advisors in different areas. So we take advantage of that and continue to learn and attend events like this. And it's very, very exciting for me. So I'm going to cut it short because I'm usually very brief. Well, questions?
Okay, we've got a few minutes for questions. Who's got questions out there? Seize this opportunity. You have amazing women in front of you.
Talk for another 20 minutes.
I'm giving a pause because there's always this little period. Yes.
Give her the mic. I got asked to ask a question, and I usually can't ask the other panelists. Doesn't matter who I'm from. So I always like to hear, as my counterpart said, let's talk about law. We're always looking for inspirational quotes or something to think about from everybody we encounter, something to remember you by. So what I was thinking about when we opened the floor for questions before is the question to you would be, what is the word or either phrase, saying that you think of in those moments of, the panel I thought of it, because they were talking about I failed, I quit, stuff like that. And those toughest moments, other than what we said, just do it, or you can do it. Other than that, what is that toughest word, phrase, or quote that you think of that lets you know that you can make it out of whatever tough situation you're in, that may inspire one of us to use in the future?
I have one. Be curious.
You go, because I'm thinking.
Dr. Seuss quote, but my favorite quote has always been, you'll never understand the importance of a moment until it becomes a memory.
I know. Okay, so mine isn't so much a quote as an image. So anytime I get like really nervous or I'm like afraid or I'm like, man, I'm gonna screw this up. Sorry, I had to censor myself. I'm gonna mess this up, or this isn't gonna go the way that I want. I kind of close my eyes and think of like all the women who came before me and all the things that they had to put up with and deal with. And then I remember I'm a young black woman who owns her own business and makes money off of the services that she provides. Like, I'm good. I'll be fine. You know?
I'm trying to remember that quote that always gives me goosebumps from Amistad. It's where he says that everything my ancestors have done, all of the lives they've lived and the sacrifices they made are all for this one moment that I'm existing in this one moment for all of her sacrifices. There's some neater way to say it, but the other one, and just to kind of really dumb down the conversation, because it's what I do. If you're watching Game of Thrones last night, I can't like give you the spoilers, but one character who's brought back to life is like not wanting to go on because he said, everything I've done and all this and I failed. And his pep talk was someone else telling him, well, yeah, you have to go out there and keep fighting and fail again. And so I like the idea of giving yourself permission to fail. Because it means you're living and you're trying things. And so, fail again, fail faster. Other questions?
Debra, can you hand me the mic behind you? Who had a question?
This is, forgive me. Anybody can answer, all of you can answer this. Talking about innovation and, having that mindset for San Antonio, what kinds of things would you recommend for us as entrepreneurs to either be stimulated ourselves to be, inspired to be innovators ourselves, and to help promote that in the community?
I'll go first. I think you have to get out there and find what your passion is, and find other people who are doing something similar, and talk and collaborate and share your ideas. One of the things that is a challenge often in communities like Geekdom and other places is people have this notion that they can't talk about their ideas because they're going to lose intellectual property protection or something. You can't own an idea. So to get out there and talk about it and let that idea live and get responded to and questioned and challenged, and I think that's important.
So I'm one of those people that subscribes to the KISS point of view, like keep it simple, stupid, right?
Sweetie.
It's simple, sweetie. I think that you don't have to go far. I think you have to go as far as your customers. And I think the biggest problem that I see is businesses not asking their customers what they want. Because if there's a need and you fill it, that's innovation, right? So I think maybe learn just to be better listeners. And part of that, I think, is on social media. And I get this a lot in nonprofits. I teach social media and integrated technology for the nonprofit. And a lot of nonprofits especially use their social media as a one-way message board. Like, I'm just going to put this out here and people are going to love it. And if that's what you're doing it wrong. It's a place to have a conversation, to listen, and you want to become a network and a hub to be connecting people with other people, because then you're needed. So if you're listening to people and then you can fill those needs, that's where you go.
I think it was Seth Godin who said, like, you basically, entrepreneurs spend a lot of time thinking that they have to come up with this amazing, original idea that no one has ever had before, and you spend so much time and waste so much time, honestly, trying to be innovative in that direction, that there's a way to apply your concepts or ideas that other people have done in a different way. So that's one thing, and again, I'm just gonna keep piggybacking off of you. Collaboration, meeting other people, surrounding yourself with people who have different opinions than you and different experiences, and also recognizing that there's enough for everybody. It's not about getting a piece of the pie or a piece of the cake. Learn how to make your own pie. Help other people make their own pie.
Yes. There's a group in Austin, and I don't know how you started here, but we call it Entrepreneurs Anonymous. It's really bizarre, but that's what it sounds like. But there could be 30 people, or there could be 10, or there could be 100. So it's just every Saturday. It's always at a certain time at a certain restaurant, and you go in as a leader who takes charge of the meeting. And it's not about introducing, like, networking, I do this and I do this, and changing business cards. It's about the idea of the day and what is your legacy is one of them. What do you think your legacy will be? And to hear other people's input on that gives you different thinking. It's not about business exactly, but it's about just a different way of thinking or a different way of seeing other people's opinions about something. And then you have a networking opportunity. And that's where I've met most of the people that I do business with. Because it's not about selling to each other at all.
Is that like EO or Vistage?
No, it's Peter Strokel started this group, and it's at Minnie's Cafe. Everybody's welcome to join. But it goes on forever, 9 to 12. So it's just can't do it all the time. But it's very productive. Very productive.
There's a saying that actually what both Alicia and Jordan were talking about reminded me of this. There's a saying, and I learned it when I was studying the arts, which is originality is a byproduct of sincerity. If you're true to yourself, you'll be original because you have to be, because there's only you. And so don't focus on being original, focus on being sincere and knowing who you are.
Any other questions? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Iris Palacios, and I'm a senior at St. Mary's University. I'm here with the Women's Business Center. First of all, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank all the speakers at the San Antonio Small Business Development Center for hosting this conference. I can personally say that I'm walking out a different person than the one that came in. Since we're on the topic of challenges and how to approach trends, I wanted to ask the panelists, how do you stay strong and true to yourselves? And in times of adversity, how do you approach change?
Okay, so one of the things that we talked about at Brash, it always ends up being like a therapy session where, you drink wine and you're like feelings. Is how hard this is, right? There's this whole hashtag girl boss, hashtag, it's like cute, and I feel like it romanticizes how difficult it is to be a business owner. It requires every insecurity you have as a person is going to get blown up exponentially in business, right? You are highly visible. You are accountable and responsible for everything that goes into running your business. If something goes wrong, people are going to blame you first, right? So when it gets hard and when it gets difficult, sometimes it's just a matter of just centering myself in moments where I've been really happy, thinking about family, playing with my dog, but remembering that all the art and music and quotes that you've heard that have helped you in some certain moment in your life there's somebody waiting for you to do that. So when you get in your head about, oh God, I'm just gonna give up and I'm tired and I hate this and screw everybody type of thing, remember that there's someone who needs you. You know, somebody told me at the last crash, I'm sorry I keep plugging this, but she said you don't have to be Oprah to everybody. You can be Oprah to like one person, right? So sometimes just remembering this sucks and it's hard and there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, but there's somebody out there who needs your talent and the work that you provide. And sometimes you won't see it, but you will get that affirmation, I promise.
Okay, so I'm a collaborator by nature because that's what we do in theater, of all sorts of artists that work together. And I'll tell you that this is a question that I had to come to grips with, and luckily I was prepared based on like past experiences, but this is a question that I really had to deal with this summer. I spent the last 2 years as the Vice President for the Association for Theater and Higher Education. It's the largest international scholarly theater organization in the world, and as the VP for conference, I was charged with planning our international conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a volunteer gig. It was about 35 to 40 hours a week sometimes. And a week before we had our 5-day conference in Las Vegas, I found out that the staff counterpart, who contracted all of our work and was supposed to be on site to run the gig while I shook hands and drank cocktails, her father went into hospice, and so she wasn't going to make it. So I had to come in and pull it together, manage a group of substitute people who didn't know my event. The thing was that I had a subcommittee through the work, and what I had done was I had surrounded myself with really competent, capable people who I trust and I love, and I didn't have to worry about it because I just had to delegate. And I think that even as a solopreneur, if you look around, you'll realize that you're not doing this alone. Like, if you're not home, somebody else is picking up the pieces. And if you're single, like, you have support systems. If you look to the person on your right and the person on your left, we have women in this room that are willing to support you. I think it's about learning how to trust people, identifying people who have strengths that are your weaknesses, and then learning to let go and let them help you. Because so often we feel like we have to do it alone. But if you can just give yourself permission to be honest and to let go and let other people help, the support system's already there. So give yourself permission to like not be in control all the time and just let things flow. I think that's really helpful. It's true though, right?
It is true.
So don't work so hard.
I have a kind of brief practical, as I get older, I get more practical. I think that, and I've heard it described in different ways, having kind of a personal board of directors or, those sorts of things. I really think you have to have key people in your life who are your touchstones, who know you, know who you are, and what your values are, and what you want your path and legacy to be in life as a person. And a lot of decisions get really simplified by focusing on that. And there's people, when you have really good friends and really good people like that in your life, they'll remind you when you start veering off course and help you course correct. And I think that's probably, one of the most valuable things to have.
I have 2 ideas. One is don't take it personal. And that way you depersonalize it. That's my go-to thing. And the next one's going to sound a little far out and wacky, but we had a really horrible year. Company was losing customers, got a divorce, it was awful, my whole life was blowing up. My business coach, which I would recommend getting one, and she said, "What's your vision?" Are you kidding me? I don't have a vision right now. Everything is destroyed. So literally she had me write just a 2-week vision. What does it look like in 2 weeks? Just put it out there. And so then I did the 2-week, and then after 2 weeks I did my year. And it just put things in perspective. And when you go back and look, and it's a positive, write a positive vision, of course. And it all worked out exactly like my vision said. And it was really amazing.
I'm going to add one more thing. And this was just based on experience. if you have somebody that's coming to you in a high stress situation and there's a specific conflict that you're forced to resolve, maybe a customer complaint or something like that, I think it's best to be honest about your limitations on what you can do, but then instead of passing judgment, give the problem to them and ask them what they think the best resolution is. Because oftentimes it's not as generous or as big as like you would have been willing to do, right? And sometimes just let other people solve that problem and then talk through it. Because what's the worst you're going to say? No, you got nothing to lose.
To this panel, my question is, as entrepreneurs, we always have great ideas, and I believe someone said it earlier, you know, I dreamt of this last night. We're talking about being innovative, but there's always a point where sometimes you have an idea that you just simply have to let go. And so my question to the panel would be, when do you know that it's time to actually let go of that idea and to try something new? And like, you hit on it a little bit, and not take it personal because it is your idea as an entrepreneur, and start an adventure to get on the right path so your business could have growth.
I'll start in our world, where it's all broken and technical, I think we can do a lot of stuff. And so we get really excited about the things that we find. So we go out and we bounce it off other people that are in other markets, and if it's not going to fly, we just kill it. And I mean, we're doing some crazy stuff in the company too about start a new company so it's fresh and new and invigorating. It's not 17 years old, and so we want to acquire our company, right? It's all just about how this will be presented. And we have people just locked down on two names. They won't give them up. That's got to be that. So you get people that are really impassioned. You're passionate about what they're doing in your company as well. And so that's the hard part, is not killing their ideas, in a polite way. I hope that helps.
Often when I counsel clients, especially when it's a new company, we talk about who are you and what do you want? Because, there's a difference between having one idea and that's the only idea that you're going to do and this is your vision of your life. But most entrepreneurs, they have short-term companies that rapidly grow and there's an exit strategy and then they start their next idea. So oftentimes if there's just one idea that you've got, you really need to rethink that because it's about constant experimentation. And if you're clinging to just one thing, you're really stagnating. Every idea should be a hypothesis. And if it's tested, you want to test it as quickly as you can and to the point where you can determine if it fails or not and move on to the next thing fast. So really thinking about what is it that you want. I know that sounds kind of existential, but you're not going to be happy unless you figure that out. And you can't really steer a ship unless you know what star you're steering by. And so kind of taking a step back sometimes and figuring that out. I like the idea of kind of vision. You've got to have something that you're steering by. And if everything seems so convoluted and it's hard to make a decision, it's because you haven't really nailed that down. And you've got to take a step back and do that first.
What if your vision is the Milky Way, not the star?
If you're Amanda Miller, you can probably still do it.
There's another thing too, that we forget to listen to our gut. The head gets in the way a lot. And that's challenging.
For me, I think you have to really check your ego. I think it's an important thing. We have this idea that leaders they're strong and they're confident, which of course they are, but like the best leaders are the best listeners. They're the people that others want to work with. So you kind of have to check your ego at the door, but then also be listening to other people's ideas, because the most important element of any sort of movement forward is buy-in. And that if you're working with a team of people, it's not only buy-in from that team, but if you have clients that you're serving, or if you have customers you're selling to, it has to be buy-in from them as well. You know, there are lots of stories of failure of really great ideas for services for a specific group of people, but nobody even asked them if they wanted it. And maybe they would have done it differently. So sometimes it's all about listening and conversation. But I think that the best thing you can do in those cases is, I want people to shoot for the stars, and I want them to have a fire, and I want them to be impassioned about what they do. So I think what you should do is write it down so you don't lose it. Because ideas and feelings and thoughts, they're ephemeral. And it's so sad to lose that, just the tangible energy you have when you're excited about something. Even if it never goes anywhere, you can still go back to it and use it as a jumping off point to your next big idea. And that is so important. Even if nobody else ever sees it, we don't need to know your secret, but use it for your own empowerment.
Okay, to be clear, I'm kind of pulling from everybody. I have like a list of every idea that I have, because they're always popping into my head, and I'm like, oh my god, that'd be great, this would be so cool. And well, like, okay, let's do a Halloween, I'm calling it Hollow fundraiser for the Ella Austin Center. Of course, I come up with that idea 6 weeks before I want to do it. It makes total sense, right? Sometimes we sit on ideas too much, especially as women. We think everything has to be perfect before we do it. Just test it and see if it works. But also, just keep it written somewhere, because you don't want to lose it. And it might turn into something else. Recognize the possibility of collaborating with somebody. Sometimes you're the hindrance to the idea of growing, and then you just step away from it. But just kind of figuring out where it works.
There are different trains of thoughts on the writing it down. Like, I like to write things down and go back and revisit them and then use them to grow. But there are artists that journal specifically to get everything out, and then they take that physical piece of paper and they light it a fire, and from the ashes they come up with a new idea. Like, that's just sort of their ritual. So whether you want to use the Phoenix element or whether you're a collector, that's up to you, but use it in your own way.
I just want to add one thing. There's a concept of the minimally viable product, and when we talk about kind of betapreneurs and always being in test mode and fail fast, we have a tendency to want to create these perfect little things that we put out in the world. That's not often how things succeed. You've got to get a minimally viable version out there and start having it interact with the world, interact with customers, figure out if what you assume to be true is really true. Because oftentimes when you put out these opinionated products, the world needs this. Well, maybe the world doesn't want that. And so, and that's kind of putting the ego aside. Don't get opinionated. You've got to figure out, you've got to let it actually happen. And it's like kind of theater. You create a play by a whole bunch of people. It's not one person. You've got to get that thing out there and see how it interacts in the real world.
Okay, so I will quote Denzel Washington said, he said, don't confuse movement with progress. And sometimes it's very easy to think, oh, again, going back to like the perfectionist aspect of it, this has to be the perfectly packaged thing before I release it and anybody sees it. But then you put it out and it's not perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. So again, just like whatever it is, find an environment and a way to test it and see if it works. And if you have a couple people who hang on to it, just grow it and build it from there.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. Everybody give our panel a big